All right, we're back here and we're ready for the top 8. But I gotta admit, I'm almost more excited for when I get to, after the stream's over with, go back and listen to the sound effect during that flourish than I am about the top 8. I mean, not really, but kind of. Anyway, we're ready for top 8. Commentator number 3, Will Krueger, is here. Let's bring him in.
Hello.
There he is. All right, so we get 8 players left out of our 70 playing for $2,000. And we have some expected mainstay decks and in the top 8, and we also have some predators that we anticipated might do well against them. So that kind of turned out kind of the way we expected. Will Krueger, we were talking in the break about how much you miss live Magic and how much you're looking forward to getting back to it. What kind of, like, is your, how important is it going to be, like, live Magic returns? Are you just gonna like? Are you like, I'm gonna go to F&M, I'm gonna go to like the local store across the state, or are you like, I'm flying to a Grand Prix no matter where it is? Like, what's your intro to live Magic gonna be? Your return.
I probably wouldn't play an F&M. I probably would if it was like at. I did play at the Nerd Rage store quite a lot, so I probably would go to Nerd Rage to do that. That's about 2 hours from me now. I'd probably drive up for that, to be completely honest. I do like Magic. Doesn't need to be an F&M. They would do a Wednesday night Modern, so I'd probably play those for some number of weeks, to be honest. I will be at the first big paper event post-COVID, 100%. Yeah. I would say wherever it is, but like, I mean, there's just so many players in North America that I'm just confident that it'll be somewhere reasonable. Like, I'm not gonna have to go to like, I don't know.
Within reason. Yeah, the first big paper event is probably going to be fairly big.
It's gonna be huge. It's probably going to be. I mean, maybe the biggest Grand Prix ever. I don't know. I remember there was one that was like 4,000 players in like 2014 or 2015 or something.
Some of those Las Vegases were big. Yeah, I think one of them. I want to say it was like 10, with the multiple flights.
If you count everything.
Pre-releases. I don't remember. Anyway, all right, we got a top 8 bracket. Let's get to it. Okay, so here we are, the 8 players that have prevailed through the Swiss rounds and gotten this far. Now, let's go around the circle. We'll start in the 2-7 matchup. Owen Turcotte and Brendan Ross, Green White Heliod and Bant Spirits. Now, Will, you're just joining us for the last few rounds today, but you've played a lot of this format. You've been watching some today, and you've played a lot of Green White Heliod, I believe. So, what do you think about this matchup against Bant Spirits?
So these two decks are actually sort of similar in the sense that they're both trying to play a one-mana accelerant on turn 1 and then follow it up by just getting ahead of their opponent on tempo. The difference is that Heliod has sort of a combo A-plan, I guess, with Spike Feeder and Heliod, or Walking Ballista and Heliod, and Spirits needs to actually win through combat almost every game. Heliod can win through combat. It does so fairly regularly. A big flashpoint in this matchup, I think, is going to be who's on the play, which in this case is going to be Owen with Heliod, because both decks are going to be featuring Noble Hierarch or Arbor Elf, which are fairly similar, or Utopia Sprawl or Arbor Elf or whatever. One-mana accelerants to play a turn 2 Skyclave apparition on the opposing player's turn 1 accelerant, because that means that you'll have 4 mana to their 2. Does this Bant Spirits deck, does it feature Collected Company? Or
yes.
It does. Okay, so both. So both are 4 companies, and being able to play that with 4 mana to your opponent's 2 is going to be just a massive, massive deal.
All right, so Skyclave Apparition on a 1-drop, really a big deal. Good analysis, Will Krueger. That's why you're here. Next up, Caleb Yetman, Jun Shadow versus Travis Williams on Green White Heliod.
Yeah, Jun Shadow versus Heliod is traditionally a matchup that favors Heliod. Spike Feeder lines up really well against Scourge of the Skyclaves.
Right.
Normally, Heliod decks will feature 3 to 4 copies of Auriok Champion main deck, which is just a huge headache for these Death Shadow decks. This one will be a little more resilient because it has Tarmogoyf and some copies of Kozilek's Return on the sideboard, so that'll be able to help out somewhat. But I think Heliod is pretty favored here, and those are going to be the sort of important things. I expect we'll see Scourges have to be boarded out, which will lower the threat density by a lot, which is kind of an issue for these Shadow decks.
All right. Next up, we got Mike Piccolo on Mono Green Tron versus Devin O'Donnell playing Jun Shadow. I'll take this one.
Yeah.
So, Green Tron against variety of shadow decks. It's not unwinnable. In fact, it's not even necessarily that bad against single shadow decks like they used to be. The addition of Scourge of Cycles, meaning there's double as many shadows in the deck and just they're more likely to be drawn, I would say that pushes it somewhat towards Devin O'Donnell's side. However, there are some varieties and there are some like kind of spaces in the Tron deck that are, there's like 55 given slots and there's your kind of your optional slots. Mike Piccolo's Tron deck is fairly well built for a shadow matchup. There are 3 Thragtusks and 3 Wormcoils main deck, and that is more than that type of card you would normally expect to see, and that's honestly what you were hoping to see. So I'm going to say Mike Piccolo going first, having those cards main deck has a little bit of an edge, but that will probably be a very tight match. And then last, the 1-8 matchup, which is what we'll be watching, Mike Hall on Death and Taxes, Mono White, versus Ben Jones on Jun's Shadow. So here we have Mike Hall's deck list. We briefly mentioned this earlier in the day, but there are only 2 Leon Arbiters, which surprised me and Will when I told you that. It surprised you also.
Yeah. Normally, these Death and Taxes decks are sort of relying on Leon Arbiter in combination with Ghost Quarter and Field of Ruin to just keep your opponent off of mana, and you're able to sort of leverage that with Ether Vial and just the various hate bears like Thalia and Archon. But yeah, this player's only brought 2 Leonin Arbiters and then 3 Ghost Quarters and 2 Field of Ruin, so only 5 lands that will interact with your opponent's lands and sort of be good with Leonin Arbiter. So it makes sense to trim down on Leonin Arbiters if you feel that you wanted more white sources, or if this player has also 4 copies of Horizon Canopy, so they'll have some benefits there in that, like, when you both have 8, 9, 10 mana or whatever, and the games go really long, I would almost always way rather draw a Horizon Canopy than a Ghost Quarter unless the opponent has like a Raging Ravine or something, but those lands aren't that common.
Right. Okay, so let's look at Ben Jones' Jun's Shadow deck. And before I forget, let's go ahead and look at the number of basics in the deck, because there are those 5 Wasteland type effects, and it looks like we do have 1 of each. So that is probably not exactly what Mike Hall is looking for. He would prefer to be playing against a deck with like 1 or 2 basics, but Jun's Shadow here with 3, a variety of creatures, including the 2 sets of shadow type creatures. Grim Lavamancer is not a card I really feel like is prevalent in the modern metagame anymore, but this is a matchup where it's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, so this list is, I'm not sure if it's exactly the same list, but it's at least very similar to a list that, I believe, I don't want to butcher his last name, but Daniel Gochel, I believe, Ghoul Dukat on Magic Online, got second in the mocks, I believe, this past weekend, playing Death Shadow with Hex Drinker and the Grim Lavamancer's main deck as sort of a hedge for Heliod and the creature decks that are doing really well in Modern. So it makes a lot of sense to have those.
Yeah, no, I agree. They'll work out well. And yeah, that Ghoul Dukat, he is. I mean, he comes up with a lot of the good stuff, and a lot of players follow him. So that doesn't surprise me at all that came from him. So here we are, game 1 of the top 8. Mike Hall on Death and Taxes on the play, and this hand is fine.
It's fine. Yeah, these Charming Princes are just. Every time I see this card, it's just so mopey. But there's definitely some cool things you can do with it. Like maybe we'll get to reset an Apparition at some point this game. This player does not have Restoration Angel, but it is kind of cool with Restoration Angel. You can blink whatever out instantly, I guess.
Yeah, I'm with you though. Charming Prince is not a card that I am overwhelmed by. It is fine. It does help you tie your draw. Like without Charming Prince, you're probably still keeping this hand, but you're worried. Whereas with 2 princes, I would imagine, pretty confident your land will come together eventually.
Yeah, one thing to note is that Charming Prince will be able to gain 3 life, which could kill a Scourge of the Skyclaves. I expect we'll be scrying here because we don't have our 3rd land drop rolled up, and we want to hit that on time. But the second one, you could easily see gaining 3 life to make a Scourge possible. I suppose Ben knows about the Scourge, and so he likely won't play it into the face-up, or he knows about the Charming Prince, so he won't play it into the face-up Charming Prince. But yeah, Mike finds his third land here with the Charming Prince and passes back.
Yeah, so there's going to be options here coming. Archon of Emeria is a card that, I didn't think much of originally, but it's proved to be more annoying than I expected.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those creatures that comes up a lot. I ended up playing a vintage showcase tournament on a whim recently, and I played with 4 copies of Archon of Emeria in my main deck, and just sort of a Bant Fish deck. And it was
Uh-huh.
really impressive in that format. Obviously, the context is a little different there, where you can turn one it a lot more easily.
Mhm.
Non-basic lands matter a lot more, and one spell a turn is a huge deal. But this mono white deck, where everything's kind of a little clunky, one spell a turn is exactly where they want to be. And like an axis that they will lose on frequently is their opponent just trading with their dorky creature for 1 mana and then playing a huge threat. And then you untap and you can only play one spell. So
Mhm.
that's a huge deal. It is Archon is a little vulnerable. Oh wow, are we going for the Maul? Interesting.
We
I
are,
guess
and yeah, I mean, Mike thought about that for a moment, but yeah, he goes ahead and brings up the Maul. So we're gonna start clocking as soon as we can. And Shadow's a deck where, I mean, sometimes players regret trying to race them because this does
yeah.
allow. Okay, this is
A defensive Maul. Okay, I'm kind of into this. So we have a 4/4 lined up here. If yeah, so Ben can't attack unless he has a TBR, which we have to imagine that he does at this point. That'll be the first instant in the graveyard. Really, any instant does it.
boy, this is
Yeah, I didn't love this play. It's a little fragile to, I mean, literally any instant.
yeah,
Another discard spell taking our path to exile. And now the
yeah.
Maul is just going to sit and play and not really do anything. Um,
This felt this felt very unsafe. Like
yeah,
I don't think we can be surprised that this went poorly for us.
no, you could
Which
kind of talk me into just jamming for 4 and maybe trying to race
right,
that way, but like that
yeah.
that gets punished by like any creature. I think I would have preferred to just develop the Archon of Emiria that turn.
Mm,
Because if you just jam with the Maul there and attack, then a Death Shadow or I guess a Scourge. Scourge is still a nightmare because they attack you and get you below 20, and then you can only Charming Prince up to 19
right.
if they have any way to make the go up to 4/5.
All right, so here we go. Prince, what are we even going to do here?
We're just passing the turn.
Oh, we can't. Can
Okay.
we really afford to do that?
Yeah, I was a little confused, but yeah, it makes much more sense. Scrying 2 seems okay here. Ben's only got 2 cards. It's not exceptionally likely that I'll have Scourge. I mean, it's not. It's pretty much just like there's no clue that tells you that he does have Scourge or does not have Scourge here at this point. I don't think. And so the gaining 3 life is probably not a great idea. And you can always flicker with your Charming Prince if you get only a little bit below 20. So
Okay, so this Hex Trigger pumps up and it's going to come in here, and this will just connect for the first damage on Mike Hall of the game, dropping to
yep.
16. And this is going to be very quickly. This is going to be a problem as
Yeah. So we have a discard spell here.
fully loaded Hex Drinker is. I mean, Ben doesn't have very many cards left, but just a bunch
Yeah, I
of
mean
mana to
he's
pump into the. Oh, well, that's a good card to have, though.
yeah, and now we're sort of seeing the really impactful threats from the Death Shadow deck just sort of outclassing the Death and Taxes creatures on an individual level. Like Ben's been able to trade 1-for-1 enough times where you can just see it's Death Shadow and Hexdrinker versus Charming Prince and Archon of Emiria, which at the end of the day is a 2/2 and a 2/3. We do have this Maul. Oh, really?
Yeah.
We're gonna attach here, and we're just gonna try to play D.
I
Okay,
mean, well,
that's
yes.
fine. If we draw a fetch, we don't really have any good blocks here because so we're just gonna shove.
Whoa.
That's pretty. Are we dead on board? No, we're not dead on board. We don't have any like burn spells that we are top decking to. So I don't fully understand this play. Right? Like there's no like lightning bolt or anything that we can just draw or team or battle rage. So I would much more expect to see a play like that from Ben's side, who could draw battle rage or bolt if he's in a precarious situation. But
Yeah. So there was a fetch drawn.
so that's only 15 damage, I believe, here. And so there's no, and you would just be dead on board to the 4. So now we just have to, we're just dead, right? The
We're
Hex
just done.
Drinker just has
Yeah.
protection from all our creatures, so
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can't we can't even double jump here, like
No. Yeah.
and
This is
like
it. So
get into a
this.
draw step out of no outer. If we could
So
double jump.
the. I mean, it's hard to really say because if the first creature with the maul on it had attacked, then the battle rage probably wouldn't have been cast, so the things would have developed differently, and Ben might have been way ahead anyway. But we Mike's not realizing he can't block yet, perhaps.
Yeah, I think we are now.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so that's over with. So the 4 damage, like 4 damage could have gotten through earlier, which would have then allowed that 4 damage that wasn't even bothered to attack for to end the game. But I think that if the Battle Rage was still in hand, then it would have been just
Yeah, if we
might have
didn't
been blown
force
up
him to
anyway.
use the Battle Rage early, but there's still a number of things like that Inquisition that was played a few turns before the end there. Maybe that Inquisition was in hand earlier. That Inquisition would
Yeah.
take our Path to Exile, and then he gets a shove anyway. His Tarmogoyf's a 4/5 to our 4/4. We're outclassed on the board. But the Archon didn't really do that much, but I still think it gave you a better chance to win than
Mhm.
just playing the Maul and then trying to block. And that, except block, like it just almost never works. Like any discard spell, any instant,
Yeah.
and like, and if he just untaps and he just plays a creature and just like doesn't attack, that's still really bad for you because then he's just drawing to a discard spell or an instant,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and if you use your path, then you're smaller because you can't use your path without growing the Goyf over your Charming Prince.
Yeah. It was bottlenecked, and it was not going to. Yeah, it just looked messy,
It
and it
was a
didn't.
tough spot. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what are we boarding in here? Sword of Feast of Famine looks good. Are we bringing in all the removal? Oh, there's Mirror
Uh,
Crusaders. There's a lot of
ooh,
potential cards here.
Mirror Crusader is nasty. Ben does have Grim Lavamancer and some number of lightning bolts, so he will be. So he's not just cold to it like some decks have been in the past, but it's good against Scourge, Shadow, and Goyf, and is pretty hard to block also, and can wear an equipment like like no other creature really. I would expect the winds to come in too, because one
Right.
axis that you can fight the Shadow decks on traditionally is
Yeah.
just like how many creatures they have, because
Mhm.
they don't have that many creatures. This one's a little different because with Scourge, you get to play Jund and have 12 really big threats with Death Shadow, Scourge, and Goyf.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind the settle either. I think you could argue for going for all the removal
Yeah,
if you
Settle's
could find
totally
stuff to
reasonable.
bring out, which I think you could. Like Alina Arbiter, I could see taking that out here. But and
Yeah,
we'll go
I
to
would
the
be
other
totally
deck
fine
list.
with
But
it.
yeah, I think you could find room for quite a few things there. Okay, so for the Shadow side, Ben Jones up a game, looking pretty good in game one. Unravel the like any disenchant. Like, do we may not even need additional disenchant since we already have Assassin's Trophy, things like that. But there's definitely cards you could bring in. I don't think we want the all-in cards. I don't know that we want the Battle Rages that we already have. We're going down to the match though as the players get ready, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Ben being less explosive.
Yeah, I definitely would anticipate Ben just sort of trying to play towards the game that we saw last game, where it
Yeah.
ended on turn 6 or 7, but we just traded 1 for 1 a bunch of times, and like we saw Hex Drinker and Death Shadow against like a Flicker Wisp. Flicker Wisp was a 3/1. Death Shadow is much bigger, much better than that. Hex Drinker, the same thing. Scourge, same thing. Like all of Ben's creatures are just much better. It's just can he effectively get to the point where they've 1 for 1 enough, and that his deck isn't able to sort of assemble the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm. The veteran mulligan there, or Mike Hall 7. Like it wasn't obviously it wasn't a good hand, but it was certainly a hand that you could argue to keep because it looked fairly safe.
Yeah,
Even though it didn't do a whole lot. This hand, on the other hand, with the Crusader and the Clave apparition, this looks like a nice hand.
it's a good hand. Yeah, I'm once again I'm looking at this Charming Prince and I'm wondering why it's in our modern deck.
Yeah,
And I'm wishing it could be any other creature. I mean I don't know, but I don't know. I don't have a specific suggestion off the top of my head because I mean Leonin Arbiter, which we cut for it, would not be very good here either.
yeah.
um, but but it's a 2-drop, and maybe you can find some of our high impact cards, or maybe you can keep the Scourge off the table, or something like that. I suppose.
Mm-hmm. All right, Thoughtseize comes across two juicy targets here, as I don't think we're selecting Charming Prince, even though it's the only argument for choosing the Prince here is because it would leave Mike Hall with nothing to do on turn two.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good enough reason to not take one of the other cards.
I agree. I think that the 3 drops are so high impact and the 2 drop is so low impact that playing to try to keep him off curve doesn't make much sense, especially because okay, well, fair enough.
Well,
Maybe this means that Ben has more discard spells in hand and he wants
sure.
to get both the 3 drops with those. So that would be my guess on what's go. I would expect that Ben will play 1 or 2 more discard spells on his turn, because he's not. I don't think you make that play without more discard spells.
Sure.
Definitely.
So if there is a discard spell here, if there's a single discard spell here, I imagine we're taking Crusader, and then just not worrying about the apparition.
Okay,
There
no
isn't one.
discard spell. So Ben disagrees
Oh.
with my play. That's interesting.
Okay, a lot of options here. I imagine so. Crusader goes down to Lightning Bolt and nothing else. Is that right?
He also has Grim Lavamancer,
Okay, sure, but
but
not. But
that's not on the
that would
table
take.
yet.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
And
And
Ben
we
likely would have played a fetch over that swamp. Okay,
yeah.
but he doesn't have any red cards in hand, or he has red mana in hand because he didn't get his mountain off the
Yeah.
wings. So that's not a bottleneck for Ben right now, is access to red. He did get double green though, so
Are
maybe.
you I personally I'm surprised that Winds of Van Banden was the play for the turn.
I'm also surprised that Winter Band was.
I
I
would have
thought we were
felt
gonna
like
play one of the 3 drops, but
yeah, I agree. I feel like myself, I would have played one of the 3 drops, probably the Mirror Crusader, and then the Winds of Abandon can work later because the Hexdrinker level 2 is protect, or I mean not level 2, but the second phase of it is protection from instants, correct? So the
yes,
Winds of Abandon was still alive to kill it anyway,
yeah, we
as
we,
long
we had
as
a while.
yeah, and the Skyclave apparition. So
Yeah, and you could just take the 2 there, and this Mirror Crusader is likely to be pretty good at racing. I would
yeah,
expect that we are going to play Mirror Crusader here because if we play Apparition, this Lurrus is probably just going to do us in. We won't be able to attack with the Crusader into the Lurrus, like not because Lurrus can block it, but because Lurrus can attack us back for 3 points, and then
yeah,
it's just like you're not really getting anywhere. And Ben's drawing us your card a turn with Lurrus. So
yeah, maybe, yeah. I don't know. I'm worried about the Hexdrinker. Yeah. Oh boy, I just feel like losing that Winds of Abandon. That's a nice card
yeah,
to have, and losing it means now we have to worry about the Hex Drinkers, and before we didn't. And so
it was a little strange, and you can also wait until Ben has invested some more mana into the Hex Drinker, and like take a little
mhm,
damage, and
yeah,
Ben spends a turn or maybe even 2 turns leveling it to like 5 or 6, and then that's a great exchange for you.
yeah,
So now Ben gets to get back a Mishra's Bauble from the graveyard with this Lurrus, and we don't have an answer because we use the
no,
Skyclave Apparition on the Hex Drinker, and we use the Winds of Abandon on the other Hex Drinker. So
yeah, I mean,
we are in some trouble.
yes, we are. I mean, this miracle, and we're just, oh no, and we're so slow to develop any offense here. I mean, we defend ourselves against the early stuff. We still have a lot of life points on turn 5, but okay,
Okay, we drew Path
that,
for the Lurrus,
yeah,
so
that's a fantastic draw
Uh,
there.
yeah, I mean,
And this
and
is
Stoneforge Mystic being the other unknown card for Ben
yeah,
is a 2 drop to play with his Path to Exile,
yeah,
and Ben's out of basic lands. So
yeah.
really, everything this turn was kind of,
That was as good as that turn could have possibly gone for Michael.
yeah, it really does not get much better than that. Ben still does have 4 more cards in hand here though, and a draw step up to 5, so it's far from over. Still have a lot of get Dismember on the Stoneforge Mystic immediately end of turn here.
All right, all right.
Definitely uninterested in letting it put the
There's
Battlestone in
boy,
play.
you know what? The running lands, if he survives, if Michael draws running lands, okay, he may not survive. The Mirror Crusader would just win the game with this sort of Fire and Ice on it.
Yeah, that would just be lethal straight up.
But
Okay,
that's okay.
we
Not
actually we're probably going to survive because we would get a block unless Ben has a lightning bolt or a team or battle rage, which is very possible.
yeah.
Um,
But even then, but we're not ready to go next turn now, no matter what we draw. So we have to survive multiple turns, and that's
yeah, surviving
pretty
multiple turns
tough.
here seems rough, especially because the sword and the batter skull they cannot possibly come down next turn. The flicker wisp does almost nothing next turn. We're going to need a really really good draw step. That's a smart out for the Mirror Crusader there.
Yeah.
It also is an out to maybe batter skull or something similar. For turn 1 Aether Vial is a huge flashpoint for these Vial. Any Vial deck like just operates on a different level when it has turn 1 Vial, and that's game because Scourge is going to deal 4 in the first strike step, and it'll grow up to 8, and so it'll deal 4 and then 8, so it's 14 plus 4, so it's 18 here, I think.
Yeah, it looks like it's enough. The
Dipping
shadows of
one, yeah.
5, 6, 10. Yeah, yeah, you were right about 18. So that will do it. So Mike Hall, his run at the top of the Swiss. Congratulations on being number 1 seed going to top 8. And here. So Ben Jones continues on in the 8th seed. He'll be playing second again in the top 4 and any other rounds he plays today. But good for him. Moving on, and we'll see if we can get a backup match rigged up depending on the progress of the other matches. But well, so how much? Oh, okay. I guess we have one
Oh,
ready
we're
to go
here.
right
Okay,
now.
fair
All
enough.
right.
And we're watching Bant Spirits against Greenway Heliod here, and it looks to me as though Greenway Heliod is pretty far ahead. This Walking Ballista looks like it's going to do some work. We don't know if the game score is correct, but we think that Greenway Heliod is up a game. So we're collecting company here. Only hit a Heliod. Can't you can put the Walking Ballista in play, but it doesn't do anything unless you have an Auriok champion out. And it looks like we're just going to take the hit for 3 here instead of trading our Ballista for it. Makes sense because we have a Heliod in play and we can combo with it. And that's the match, I guess. Okay, fair enough. We watched the very last turn of that.
Okay, so green-white takes that one down. I don't know if we're going to have another backup match, but going back, okay, no other backup matches. So until we get things turned over for the top 4, well, so we saw some plays in the game 2 of the match we saw more of, the Shadow versus Taxes match. The Winds of Abandon was maybe fired off a little earlier than we would have preferred. Did that? Do we think that dramatically altered the outcome of the game, or was that kind of just a blip and probably the Death and Taxes get run over anyway? Because it feels to me like we could have sequenced things more aggressively there and maybe turned out better.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible that the game was winnable for the Death and Taxes player, but the Death Shadow draws were really, really strong. I am curious if the game would have played out if we had just kind of like let that Hex Drinker chill for a couple turns, because it didn't really do anything until Ben wanted to invest more mana, and at the point in which he did, it would still be vulnerable to the winds unless he wanted to wait and then level it to 8 in 1 turn, which is not really a thing that's going to happen. That's not happening for forever. It's just a 2/1 in the meantime, so you can just ignore it and save it for Scourge, or Death Shadow, or Tarmogoyf, or maybe even a Grim Lavamancer, or the Lurrus that was face up.
All right, so we have Ben Jones, and then we have winning, and we're gonna bring up. We haven't been using these yet today. We have our player slides, which show the player's history through the event so far today. So we saw Ben Jones just win with Jund Death Shadow. So here are his matchups and results on the day. So he defeated Tron in the first round. So somehow we didn't disqualify him from the tournament just for that offense. But okay, we just swapped. I don't know if we did that on purpose or not. But anyway, now we're. Can we go back to the first one? Okay,
we're
going to go back to the first one in a second, since we didn't get more than a brief moment at that one. But this is so this is Brendan. The one that's on the screen now is the player that just lost in the top 8. But who? Okay, I looked at that and was confused that both players played Patrick Smith in the first round, but we just switched it back. That's why it looked like that. Yeah. So Ben Jones played Tron in the first round, and again, I feel like Jund Death Shadow is maybe a little bit ahead of Tron. Mickey Siegel, who we saw in round 7, Devoted Devastation, who ended up 5-2 and either probably 9th or 10th place, did lose to Ben Jones. And then we see his progression. He won all the rest of his matches so far. Are any of these outliers that look to you like upset wins for Ben Jones, where he would have been expected to lose?
Nothing where I would really... Well, I guess I am a little surprised that he lost to Devoted Devastation. The Devoted Druid deck is usually pretty fragile to just like piles of removal spells and quick clocks, which this just Jund Shadow deck sort of is a perfect example of. Just a million removal spells. They're all cheap and a bunch of very cheap creatures. But Mickey Siegel had a Heliod sideboard plan. He could board into Spike Feeder and Heliod, and that is definitely very strong against Death Shadow. And we see he lost 1-2. I would maybe expect that that Mickey lost game 1 because his deck is very all in on that happening, and maybe boarded into the more resilient Heliod plan, which is not that much more resilient, but is more resilient somewhat.
And we did see he also defeated Sam Pardy's 80 card Yorion pile of interesting singletons.
I did not see that.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. But let's bring up our second player who is through to the semifinals so far. Yeah. Owen Turcotte, who just defeated that Banned Spirits player that we saw about 12 seconds of as the match was finishing. Who Owen is undefeated on the day, taking initial draws around 6 and 7, and actually defeated Mike Piccolo in round 4. And Mike Piccolo also made top 8 of this event.
Yeah. Owen is 6-0 in matches played, and I believe he hasn't lost a game. If our graphic here is correct, nobody's been able to take a game off him. That's pretty awesome. He's won 1 Heliod mirror, and then he's beaten a bunch of people who showed up without Heliod in their deck, which is certainly a decision you're allowed to make, I guess.
Oh, will you stop?
But okay, I think that deck is awesome. I think that deck is
Owen Turcotte hasn't lost a game yet in the tournament. Let's go ahead and bring his deck up on the screen while we're waiting for the other matches to finish up. Just so Will can take a look at this. Will played a lot with green white. We'll see what he thinks of this particular deck list. Okay, we don't have his deck list ready to go because he wasn't. We're watching. Okay, we are going to have the top 4 bracket though in a moment because it sounds like all 4 matches are already completed. So when that's ready to go, we'll take a look at it. Our production staff has been reduced from 2 to 1. So Max Khan now running all facets of the show right now. So give him some applause and shout outs in the chat while he struggles to bring everything together. But when he's ready, we're going to have the top 4 bracket. And okay, so this is the top 8 bracket, and we have our winners as we know Ben Jones won. And we know that Owen Turcotte won, so the 2 seed and the 8 seed. Here we are with the other 2. Unfortunately for me, the Tron deck did lose, as I was looking at that as the hope to beat the green and white Heliod decks. Devin O'Donnell with Jund Shadow is our other winner. So we have 2 mirrors, and Travis Williams with green white Heliod. So Owen and Travis in the green white Heliod mirror, Ben and Devin in the Jund Shadow mirror.
The finals will be Jund Shadow against Heliod, which, in my opinion, are the 2 best decks in the format. So that's honestly not that surprising to me.
That's excellent. Okay, so we're going to take a break and get those matches set up on camera. We'll be right back with the top 4.